If you ride long enough, you're bound to get a flat tire. And since most modern motorcycles roll on tubeless radial tires, it can be possible to fix the puncture. But are plugs reliable? Are they even safe? Today on RevZilla, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of tire repair so you know when it's okay to plug a flat and when you should just get a new tire. Let's open up the shop manual. Having a tire repair kit and knowing how to use it can really save your bacon. I carry two kits with me whenever I ride. I've got gas station variety rope plugs that I'll use for big, ugly punctures, and then I've got a Dynaplug kit that I'll use for smaller holes. And I have actually ridden all the way from Los Angeles to Boston on a repaired tire. So yeah, I think plugs can be both safe and reliable if they're installed properly. Now, plugs are only for use in tubeless tires, so if you're wondering if that's what your bike has, here's an easy rule of thumb. If your motorcycle is less than 20 years old and rolls on one-piece alloy wheels, odds are it's got tubeless tires. Meanwhile, spoke wheels almost always use tubes, unless of course you're on a modern high-end ADV that has sealed spoke wheels. The fact is, motorcyclists fix flats in tubeless tires all the time, but they could be plugging away indiscriminately with limited knowledge of the proper repair process and the risks associated with riding on a repaired tire. There is a big difference between an emergency fix where you, say, stuff 3 rope plugs into a gaping wound just to get home, which we would never recommend, and what you might call a long-term or a permanent fix that you can ride on pretty much like normal. Just to be clear, not all manufacturers condone repairs, even in emergency situations. The safest option is fresh rubber, but that's probably not what you want to hear, especially if you just picked up a screw in a tire that otherwise has a lot of life left in it. Okay, so if you've accepted the risk, there are a few things you need to consider before repairing the tire. They are the location, shape, and size of the puncture. For starters, the eligible repair area is limited to the tread of the tire, specifically the center 75%. That's because the shoulders flex too much as you ride and they might spit a plug out like a sour grape. The sidewalls are off limits to plugs for the same reason. The tire also needs to have a reasonable amount of tread left to retain the plug. Technically, the minimum is a 1/16 of an inch, which is about 1.5 millimeters. That just so happens to be the distance between the top of Abraham's head and the edge of a penny. Assuming the puncture is in the allowable area and you've got enough meat left to the tread of your tire, you then need to consider the shape and size of the damage. Now, typically, tears, slices, and oblong punctures are considered too risky to try and fix. Luckily, that kind of damage is pretty rare. For the more common stuff, the standard holes like you'd get from a nail or screw, the maximum puncture size is limited to between 3 and 7 millimeters, depending on which manufacturer you ask. For reference, 7 millimeters is slightly smaller than your standard Bic pen or your classic number 2 pencil. So if the puncture is bigger than that, you're out of luck. Now again, that is all for emergency fixes to get you home. However, for a repair to be considered permanent, at least according to manufacturers, you would also need to remove the tire from the rim and install a combined plug patch. A plug patch like this both fills the void made by the hole as well as covers the hole from the inside of the tire, and that provides 2 means of sealing the puncture. It's also important to carefully inspect the inside of the tire once you have it off the rim. Tubeless tires don't usually bleed off all their pressure all at once when they're punctured. They're actually designed not to for safety, so it's possible for the rider to keep trundling along on a deflating tire. If you do that, the tire could overheat, or the puncture, the nail or whatever, might gouge the inner liner of the tire as the rider is cruising. Another caveat with repaired tires is that the original speed rating basically goes out the window. Once a tire has been plugged and patched, it's usually recommended that you don't ride faster than 75 miles an hour. That's because the puncture might have damaged the carcass or the tread belting, and by limiting your top speed, you can reduce the risk of a failure. And while it's obviously good to know when it's okay to plug a tire, you also need to know how to plug a tire. So the next time your motorcycle needs new tires, go ahead and run some nails in there, run some screws in there, read the instructions for your tire repair kit, and practice the process so that you're familiar with it before you have to do it for real on the side of the road. So repairing a tubeless tire, there's obviously a lot of variables and there's a lot of responsibility you have to take for yourself. Me personally, I'm gonna do just about whatever it takes to put air back in that tire, even if that means running a lot of plugs in it and riding extremely slow with my hazards on to get home. But ultimately, the decision is up to you. So I hope with this video, you have learned what the criteria are, what some of the risks are, what some of the factors are that you need to consider the next time you get a flat on your bike.